So this is my hunt day one, basically, kind of, sort of. Hunting season's been open for 2 months now, I think, or 2.5 months. And but I already know my spots. I know when everything's going to show up and where it should show up. But this one particular hill up here is a heli logging block, and it takes a bit of a grunt to go straight up to it. But I hiked up here nonstop 4 years ago. Had a hunch there might be a big buck. Found a big one. Not quite the one I was after. Filmed another big one. But I was waiting for that Mac Dad to show up, and I can't give up on a spot. So every year I hike up. I skipped a year once, and the wolves came and annihilated everything. And I found a camera up here. I forgot about it for 2 years, and still there was only one deer and a bunch of chipmunks. So I came up again. Sarah came up. She's got the camera right now. The lovely Sarah. And she let me drag her up here, and because we came up here in July, and I packed a bunch of salt, 2 cameras up here. So I had a camera kind of like this one tied onto the stump just now, and I put a card reader on it just now, and it is loaded. There is tons of deer on it. It's really exciting, but way too many to use the batteries up on the phone to check it here. I'll do it once I get in the computer at home. So I got a replacement camera. I'm gonna put this different piece of string on here, and I couldn't get the string wasn't quite big enough to go around here, so it's got to stick like this. I'm gonna jam it in this here, and that'll work fine. And it's on the downhill, so I'm gonna put a little stick in there, one that'll fit to make sure it angles down. I don't want the stick to angle down because I don't need snow load to dump it over, which is coming. Snow is coming big time. Base that down the trail. Lean that back a little bit. Yeah, it's not going anywhere. The only thing that does suffer a chance of, which will probably happen, is it's going to barf snow and it's going to cover that sucker. And that thing will be covered before the deer get out of here. That'll be the only shitty thing. So actually thinking about that, I might as well fix that before I leave. Sure will. But anyways, this is fun. This is my month of all year. This is my time to shine and be stoked and excited. I love this month. I love hunting by myself for monster blacktail deer. While I'm up here, I'm gonna read this email I got from a train conductor. I was so stoked to get this email from a train conductor because I don't know any. And trains travel through BC nonstop through all these remote mountain passes along remote riverbanks. And you know these guys see shit piles of game and who knows what else, that big beaming bright light, right? So lo and behold, and so on that note, you guys, if any of you know family members work for the railroad, and just ask them straight up, be straight up honest and matter of fact, and ask if they've ever seen any kind of goofy at work or know anybody who has. And I would almost bet the farm you're gonna get, well, yeah, we have, right? And proofs is in this email right here. Listen to this one. I was excited to read this. And please, all you other guys and gals that work for the railroad, email me. Email me what you've seen, because I know you get to see a lot more than anybody. Now listen to this one. Steve, you've done an excellent job allowing people to tell their stories about Bigfoot. Thank you for your courage and commitment to the truth coming out about Bigfoot. I have seen Bigfoot several times during my work for the BNSF Railroad as a switchman and later on as a train engineer. The route I worked on for over 25 years ran along the Mississippi River in the upper Midwest. High river bluffs and wooded valleys was the terrain. When I first started, the old-timers that showed me the job always warned about walking the train cars from the caboose up to the engines, especially at night and in remote areas. I couldn't get any much more out of them other than just to be careful. There was no bear cougar around, but it was dark and creepy. After a few months of running freight routes, the train engineer I was assigned to told me what to do if for some reason I had to come up from the caboose to the front of the trains. We didn't have radios back then, so the engineer told me he would let me know what was happening by short or long blasts on the train horn. Now, the normal number of train cars that we hauled was around 130 cars, so it took about 15 minutes to walk to the front of the train. At night, walk along it with the woods in a remote area was quite scary at times. One night while riding the caboose, the train suddenly blew the air brakes and the train eventually came to a stop. The engineer blew the train horn short blast several times. This indicated there was an emergency and I needed to get to the front as quickly as I could. As I got to the front of the train, the engineer was standing alongside the train with his flashlight. As I approached him, he was scared and he told me he thought he hit someone. We were in the middle of nowhere and I don't know who would have been out there at night. So I did the scariest thing I've ever had to do, which was walking alongside the train at night looking for a body. I walked and looked and found nothing. We were trained on human train collisions, and usually the body was obliterated. We found no blood, and the front of the train engine showed no damage. I told the engineer that I found nothing, so I asked him what happened. He was visibly shaken and told me that a big guy dressed in black had crossed right in front of the train, and that he looked up at him just as he disappeared. That's all he would say. Since the train air brakes were blown, I had to inspect the whole train brakes, which would take hours. The engineer was so shaken that he kept telling me to hurry up and be careful. I finished up and we got in our unit train to our next stop. We had bunkhouses along the way, and at that stop, the engineer told me what more that happened. He was a man that had been on the railroad for over 35 years and saw a lot. What he saw that night, many nights, he said, was Bigfoot. He said they usually stood alongside the railroad tracks just watching the train. This was the only time he thought he hit one, and it seemed like he cared about their safety. I was in awe of what he told me. As time went by, I always thought about that night. One evening while riding in the caboose, I was watching the riverside and just enjoying the scenery. I saw a Bigfoot step out from the side of the railroad tracks on the riverside. This thing was massive. In size, at least 8 to 9 feet tall, black hair, but his face was somewhat human. Sometimes we saw hunters along the tracks, but this was no man. It just stared as the train went by, and I watched as it went down the tracks. On the next stop, I told the engineer what I saw, and he told me to keep quiet. This was a different engineer, but he said he's seen some strange things in his decades of working on the railroad, but that's all he said. A few years after that, I was riding in the engine compartment with a different engineer in control. We both saw something up ahead on the tracks that was hunched over a dead deer carcass. It stood up and looked at us, and in about 2 strides was off the tracks into the woods. We both looked at each other and never said a word. This also was in a very remote area, far from any town. The next few years were quiet, and I moved up to engineer in control of the train, with a switchman riding either with me or in a caboose. We actually started to do... Oh my god, the rain's screwing me up here. Hold on a second. Oops. We actually started to do without the caboose, and we now had 2 radios. One night in another remote area along the Mississippi River, I saw ahead some big rocks laid across the tracks. Going about 35 miles per hour, I performed an emergency stop on the train, which dumped the air brakes. We skidded over the rocks and luckily didn't derail. I sent the switchman down to get more look at the rocks. The area to the tracks was flat, so the rocks couldn't have come from that side, and the rocks are pretty big. It would have taken a couple of guys to haul them rocks up from the river embankment, but again, there's nothing around. Was it a sign from Bigfoot? It was just a strange incident and we had to report it. They chalked it up to vandals, but who would do that? Right before I retired on one of the runs, I saw 3 Bigfoot step across the tracks a ways ahead, and I was able to throttle down the train and slow just a little and watch them walk down a stream that fed into the Mississippi. They stopped and watched as I rolled by, and I waved to them. These 3 Bigfoot looked to be the same size, just massive shoulders with dark black hair. They just stood and watched. I gave a short blast on the train horn. You could see in the reaction they didn't like that. At our next stop in the bunkhouse that day, I ran into a repair crew who was working on the tracks near where I saw the 3 Bigfoot. I knew the crew leader quite well, and I told him I saw a Bigfoot near where they were working. This man told me that one of their utility cars was parked on the siding was found tipped over a few days earlier. It weighed 5 tons. Also, there were crates of spikes and anchors that were picked up and tossed. We both figured out that it was probably the Bigfoot sending a message. There's no man that could have done this, and it was very remote. A few days later, while doing the same run, except going north, I anticipated the area where I had just seen the Bigfoot, and I slowed as I came by this creek. It was dark, but the lights on the engine were pretty bright. In the distance, I saw 2 Bigfoot crouched down by the bridge going over the creek. They stood up and disappeared into the dark. My switchman was with me and was totally freaked out. I told him my stories and what other stories I heard. He eventually transferred out of the switchman job. No doubt. My final time that I saw a Bigfoot was the same exact area 2 years later. The same creek, crossing this time early in the morning, but up ahead I saw 3 Bigfoot. They walked down off the tracks towards the creek side. I slowed the train down, hoping to get a longer look at them. They were there looking up at the train. I waved to them, and one of them made a horizontal motion with its arm. I've seen Native Americans make this motion as a sign language. Is that what I did? I would also add that I only saw Bigfoot in the fall along the Mississippi River. This brush was too thick to see them in the summer. They could have been in there, but who knows? Were they traveling along the river using the railroad as a highway, possibly migrating? I am glad I saw them, but I'm also glad I never hit one. Those are my stories, and I hope someday we can communicate with these creatures. I wish I could have given them a ride on the train, helping me get to where they were going. Please share and thank you. Now, how is that for a frickin' handful of experiences? And I can thank you so much for sending the email. Everybody appreciates this for sure. And I can only imagine what kind of game you must have seen as well in those tracks and on those travels. It must have been just frickin' amazing. That's an amazing, amazing career and what you saw. And obviously, you know as well as I do, everybody knows as well as I do, there's going to be other train conductors out there with a piss load of stories. So, but anyway, if any of you guys know some people who work for the railroad, ask them. Just ask them in an honest tone, honest delivery, and ask them with a friendly delivery, matter-of-fact tone, with full-on respect, and ask them if they ever seen anything goofy at work. And I'm sure they will probably won't even be enough time in the evening for them to tell you everything, right? So, but anyways, we got to get going. Poor Sarah's probably frozen stiff right now. Are you all right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm? You hanging in there?
Yeah.
You're allowed to speak. Nobody can see you. So anyway, snow line's coming down, man. God, I can't wait. This is going to be an exciting month. We got another camera to check on the way down off to the side and get this one a little higher for the snow that's going to dump. And I'm going to get this SD card home. There's a pile of videos on it. I always set it to video. And maybe I'll link up everything that's been on here from July until today. And you can see exactly what we're going to go see in the next, well, by this evening by the time we get back. So there you go. Make sure if you got something you want to share with everybody, get something off your chest, share my story at howtohunt.com, tell my story at howtohunt.com, get it in. And I have a pile of new heavy impact emails, experiences that people send it to me. It's coming in every single day. Every single day, numerous people email me from around the world. Every single day. It's incredible. Anyway, be safe out there.